also the climate change aspects that you mentioned and your work around retrofitting and moving our city in the direction of lower emissions while also saving funds. And the biggest sources of emissions in our city are housing and transportation. So our buildings, our building envelopes, and transportation systems. In the past, we've talked about the retrofit of our buildings and the necessity there. There's usually a 5 to 7 year return as we do this, and when the municipality starts to save a lot more money, and we lower our emissions by doing it. I know you've made an offer previously to City of Ottawa to help in that regard, retrofitting our own buildings. We didn't take you up on that offer previously, and I think the word was back then that we could do it at a lower cost, lower borrowing rate sort of thing. But here we are, we haven't done that. So I just wonder, is that offer still on the table? Are there economies of scale to be achieved here? And I think you'll find there's more appetite now to do this sort of thing. I think a lot of other councillors have come on board with this necessity, and that we'd see a real positive for our city if we started to retrofit our buildings in that way. So I'd love to hear your comments on that.
So complete agreement. Transportation is obviously the biggest driver of emissions, and buildings would be second. I think the city has a pretty progressive plan under its energy evolution program to sort of address those. The short answer to your question, Councillor, is yes, the offer was made. Yes, the offer is still valid. We believe that there is huge economies to be, much like your street lights, where, as the chair noted, you're saving $4 million a year without losing anything. We were able to do that project faster than you otherwise would. We believe that we are capable of delivering those, the project manager around those energy retrofits. The issue becomes the pace and the payback, quite frankly. You referenced 5 to 7 years. Some of these, when you do deep retrofits, you're beyond 5 to 7 years. You're in the 10-year thing. So if council's prepared to go to that length of a payback period, you have a lot of buildings that I should say a lot. You have some that have passed their best before date, I would politely say, which could generally use some upkeep, and we believe there's opportunities there. So we're happy to continue working with you, and yes, the offer to help fund it is there.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Conrad. I appreciate that. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for our delegations from Hydro Ottawa? No? So we have 4 recommendations before us. All in favor? Carried?
Carried.
Adopté. Thank you very much again, Mr. Durrell and Mr. Conrad and your colleagues, and to the board members who sit on Hydro Ottawa on our behalf. Next item is Integrity Commissioner, Commissaire à l'Intégrité, report to Council on an inquiry respecting the conduct of Councillor Jan Harder. On point of privilege, Councillor Harder.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to inform Council colleagues of my decision to tender my resignation as Chair and member of the City of Ottawa's Planning Committee, effective immediately. Quite simply, the hyper-aggressive online attacks and libel directed at me and others since Friday threatens to curtail the city building work that must continue at Planning Committee. I will not allow the endless noise and innuendo amplified online to railroad the important work the committee must accomplish to continue making Ottawa one of the most desirable cities to live in on the planet. The report infers an appearance of conflict of interest by me in my role as chair of the Planning Committee. However, here are the facts. There was no violation in hiring practices, no violation of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and no evidence of any conflict of interest. Over the last few days, I have faced online harassment from what appears to be an organized campaign from an agenda-driven lobby group. Aside from me, many individuals, including some around the council table, have had their good names tarnished. This vocal group of opponents seem to be against the transformational development we have been witnessing in this city. I maintain that the only finding this politically driven report has shown is that city policies on hiring need to be revisited and updated. I understand, however, that the report being tabled today has caused divisions within council. To my colleagues, I recognize this has put you all in a difficult position. That was never my wish, and for that, I am sorry. This decision hurts me as I have worked tirelessly and with great commitment over the last 6 years, actually more than 6 years, as the chair of planning and previously in other capacities in building our Ottawa as a world-class city where our citizens benefit from this growth. I am proud of my contributions to the development of our city. Rest assured that I will continue to work harder than ever for my constituents in Barrhaven. I am looking forward to having increased availability to spend more quality time in the ward with my constituents. I will continue to work with like-minded councillors who seek to unify and not divide our great city. We are blessed to live in this city. Never forget that. I have always and will always work to make it the best it can be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harder. So we'll have anyone who has motions and also the Integrity Commissioner is here to answer questions. I misspoke when I said that he would do a presentation, but he's here to answer questions. So I have a motion, seconded by Councillor El-Shantiri. Whereas the Integrity Commissioner has issued his report regarding the conduct of Councillor Harder pursuant to the Code of Conduct of Members of Council Code, and whereas as provided in both Section 223.4(5) of the Municipal Act 2001 and Section 15 of the Code of Conduct for Members of Council, the Integrity Commissioner may make recommendations to City Council with respect to sanctions and other corrective actions. And whereas City Council has the authority to impose any of the sanctions and other corrective actions recommended by the Integrity Commissioner, as well as other sanctions or corrective actions Council deems appropriate arising from the findings of the Integrity Commissioner subject to the Municipal Act 2001, and whereas Council has the authority to accept, amend, or reject the recommendations from the Integrity Commissioner and to approve additional corrective measures, and whereas Councillor Harder has stepped down as Chair of the Planning Committee as well as a member of that committee effective immediately and has stepped down from the Ottawa Land Development Corporation, the Planning Advisory Committee. Therefore, be it resolved, the Council receive the Integrity Commissioner's report and approve the following as a replacement motion for the recommendations set out in the Integrity Commissioner's report. The Council direct the City Clerk with the Integrity Commissioner, the City Solicitor, and the City Manager to 1. Develop an ethical framework for member staff as described in the guidance section appended to the Integrity Commissioner's report. 2, review and make recommendations for enhancing the procedure for the procurement of consultants by members of council, including developing criteria which members are required to consider before entering into a contract with a consultant and enforcing the requirement the consultant sign a non-disclosure agreement before work commences under each contract. 3, undertake a concurrent review of the Code of Conduct for members of council and the Lobbyist Code of Conduct and make recommendations with respect to the practice of hiring consultants who are also registered lobbyists and the related issues as described in the guidance section appended to the Integrity Commissioner's report. And 4, report on the recommended ethical framework for member staff, enhanced procedures for members, procurement of consultants, and the outcome of the concurrent review of the Code of Conduct for Council's consideration as part of the 2022-2026 Council Governance Review. And I think we have some other motions, if we can just put the hands up on the screen. Councillor Chiarelli, do you have a motion you'd like to table? I think you're on mute.
Not a motion. I have comments and question.
Okay, we'll come back to you. We're just getting any other motions. Councillor Meehan, you have a motion?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Go ahead, present it.
Okay. 2 seconds. Okay. Just pulling it up here. Okay. Whereas the Integrity Commissioner's report, just a second. I guess you want me to read off the big screen. Okay. Whereas the Integrity Commissioner's report into the conduct of Councillor Harder identifies several planning applications that have come before the Planning Committee this term where the Sterling Group was in some way involved in the application while the company was retained on contract with the Chair of Planning Committee. Whereas on June 9th, 2021, Council approved a zoning bylaw amendment for 2 and 20 Leakin Drive and 99 Bill Leatham Drive, for which the Sterling Group was part of the applicant team, and Jack Sterling of the Sterling Group appeared as a delegation at Planning Committee. Be it resolved that the city solicitor undertake to conduct an independent legal review of recent council decisions on planning applications for which the Sterling Group has been involved, including those outlined in the Integrity Commissioner's report and the zoning bylaw amendment for 2 and 20 Leakin Drive and 99 Bill Leatham Drive, approved by council on June 9th, and advise council of any potential impacts of the Integrity Commissioner's findings on the legal status of those applications. And be it further resolved that the city solicitor, in consultation with the city clerk, advise council on council's ability to revisit its most recent decision on the zoning bylaw amendment for 2 and 20 Leakin Drive and 99 Bill Leatham Drive as a result of the new information provided to council in the Integrity Commissioner's report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other motions? Councillor Leeper has a motion.
Sorry, Chair. Yep, no, it's Chair. I'd like to move that we move into committee of the whole for this debate. I believe that as we debate it, we're likely to get into some complex arguments because of the highly legal nature of it, and I believe that moving into committee of the whole so that we can suspend the speak once rule is likely helpful, so that everybody is voting with all the information that they need at hand.
And do you have a seconder?
I believe Councillor Menard will second that.
Okay. I would argue it's not necessary to go into committee of the whole, so I'd encourage members to vote against this motion. So yeas and nays on going into committee of the whole.
Councillor Elshantiri.
No.
Councillor Luloff.
No.
Conseil Cloutier.
No.
Councillor Kitts.
No.
Councillor Tierney.
No.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Gower.
No.
Councillor Deans.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
No.
Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Egli.
No.
Councillor Meehan.
Yes.
Councillor Harder.
No.
Councillor Suds.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I don't believe Councillor Harder can vote on these items.
Mr. Clerk, is it a procedural? This is a procedural matter. Is Councillor Harder permitted to vote on this procedural issue?
I'm of the view that yes, she is entitled to vote on the procedural matter.
Okay, thank you.
What about the main motion?
Continue on, please.
Councillor Suds.
No.
Councillor DeRuse.
No.
Councillor Moffat.
No.
Councillor McKenney.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli.
Yes.
Conseil Fleury.
Oui.
Councillor Menard.
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Dudas.
No.
Mayor Watson.
No.
10 yeas, 14 nays.
Right. Next on motions, Councillor Menard, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do have a motion. If clerk can get it on the screen, please. And if I could just get clarity while we're waiting for that from the city clerk on what motions Councillor Harder is and is not allowed to vote on today. I understand there's recommendations from the Integrity Commissioner. These are motions stemming from that recommendation and this item on the agenda. So I understood that member of council could not vote on the IC recommendations. And I'm wondering how that relates to the other motions that are coming as a result of the IC's report.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, as I put in the procedure memo yesterday, a recitation of the relevant clauses in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act indicate that the member in particular can speak to issues with regards to such matters as any suspension of pay that might be in hand. And she can speak before, during, and after, according to the legislation. With regards to procedural matters, that is something that is entirely different in my view. So if there are procedural questions, she would be entitled to vote on those.
And what about the motions that we have in front of us now, Clerk? So for example, this motion from myself or Councillor Meehan's motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd have to review all of the motions one at a time because I, quite frankly, haven't seen all of them in their final format. So I can do that as we look. If the motion, for example, is not dealing with a suspension of pay, I believe that the member might even be allowed to vote on it, but I'll have to check.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. I'll read this motion out, Chair. Whereas the most recent report from the Integrity Commissioner has given rise to concerns about the perception of close ties between the development industry and local government, in particular as it relates to some developers, consultants, and lobbyists, and council and senior planning staff. And whereas in accordance with the City of Ottawa's lobbyist registry bylaw, lobbying occurs when an individual representing a financial or business interest or the financial interest of a not-for-profit with paid staff communicates with a member of council or city staff to try to influence a decision on governmental matters that are outside of standard processes. And whereas the federal government has established a 5-year post-employment prohibition on lobbying, which excludes designated senior public office holders defined in the Federal Lobbying Act and including both elected officials and senior public servants from being paid to work as a consultant lobbyist on behalf of an organization or corporation for 5 years after their last day of employment as a designated senior public office holder, and whereas establishing such a post-employment lobbying prohibition for municipal staff and elected officials would support efforts to restore public trust in the independence of the planning process, and whereas Section 223.9 of the Municipal Act 2001 authorizes municipalities to provide for a system of registration of persons who lobby public office holders, including the authority to prohibit former public office holders from lobbying current public office holders for a specified period of time. And whereas the Municipal Act 2001 defines a public office holder as including A, a member of the municipal council and any person of his or her staff or their staff, B, an officer or employee of the municipality, C, a member of a local board of the municipality and any person on their staff, D, an officer, director, or employee of a local board of the municipality, and E, such other persons as may be determined by the municipality who are appointed to any office or body of the municipality or by a local board of the municipality. Therefore be it resolved that the Integrity Commissioner work with the Office of the City Clerk as part of the 2022-2026 governance review to include considerations for the City of Ottawa to introduce post-employment lobbying restrictions as part of its lobbyist registry bylaw.
Okay, are there any other motions at this time? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres motions? Okay, questions and debate. Councillor Chiarelli.
Thank you, Your Worship. My first question relates to the section of the report where the Integrity Commissioner starts off by saying that he determined the complaint that was issued was not frivolous, vexatious, or politically motivated, but he doesn't say how he arrived at that conclusion. He doesn't establish his reasons. Did he in fact investigate that, or was that just him musing once he heard the complaint?
Mr. Marlowe.
Morning, Your Worship. Morning, councillors. To the councillor through you, Your Worship, we have we have established in my office a very rigorous intake analysis of these complaints. And so once seized by a complaint, we review all documentations that are related to the sworn affidavit, any others or publicly available documentation. I do interview the complainant, and on the basis of those interviews, I ask relevant questions to vexatious and frivolous. Vexatious can include political attacks or politically motivated intentions in filing a complaint, and I assess all of that in that context.
Okay, but the question was, did you investigate anything related to that? Or was that just your impression?
Your Worship, to that specific question, on the basis of the early evaluation, in the context of evaluating that particular complaint, there were no grounds to investigate a politically motivated aspect of the complaint. That undercurrent is constantly in mind of both the investigator and myself as the investigation goes forward. And we found, as I say in the report, I found absolutely no grounds to justify an evaluation that would say this was politically motivated.
Okay, so during the investigation, was the politically motivated issue, wasn't that raised to you by Councillor Harder? And if so, why would you not investigate any of the elements of that she pointed to?
During the course of the investigator's investigation, as I said, the only aspect that might have that was raised by Councillor and or the council was that the confidentiality of the name of the complainant was a concern that it might be someone who was politically motivated. The response to that is that is confidential, required under the law, and his evaluation and my evaluation is that there were no political considerations.
And under the law